Why is picking out the perfect golf launch monitor so difficult? It's like there's only 10 or 15 that are really out there for consideration, and realistically, there's probably like 2 to 3 that you're actually thinking about that are the right fit for you. But for some reason, because there is no perfect golf launch monitor, they all use different technologies and have different features and are at different price points, making that final decision for picking out the right one is just a weirdly hard thing to do. And I talk to people every single day that are in the market for buying a launch monitor, and many people keep making the same mistakes over and over. So today's video, I'm gonna tell you what those mistakes are so that you don't make them yourself. If you're in the market for a golf launch monitor this year, keep watching because hopefully we're gonna make that decision just a little bit easier for you. Okay, number one, the biggest mistake I see people make when they're buying a golf launch monitor is making the wrong choice when it comes to radar versus camera. So if you're not up to date on launch monitor technology, essentially there's two different types of launch monitors. There's ones that use Doppler radar that track what the ball actually does to give you your information. And then there are other ones that use high-speed cameras. So what those do is they watch what happens exactly at impact when you hit the ball, and then it will give you information based on that. Now, just on their own, one of these is not necessarily better than the other, but for you and your use case, one of them absolutely is better than the other. So you have to kind of think about what your particular use case is, how you are planning to use this the most, because this is the most important decision you can make. So let's say you're planning to use this at home. You have a relatively small space. You're planning to just set something up in the garage so that you can keep swinging the clubs during the off season. Well, the chances are good that you're probably going to want a camera-based system, because with most radar-based systems, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to put the unit 7 to 8 feet behind the ball, and then you're also going to need 7 to 8 feet in front of the ball so that it has enough ball flight to be able to track the information. So you're typically looking at about 15 feet minimum in order to make a radar unit work accurately indoors. And I don't know about you, but 15 feet, like that's not an insignificant amount. A camera-based system, on the other hand, it sits right next to the ball. So you still need that 8 feet in front of you, but you don't need that 8 feet behind you. So you need roughly like 1/2 to 2/3 of the amount of space that you would use for a radar unit. So what I end up seeing frequently is people will start looking at prices and they will start looking at feature sets, and they will realize that often those radar units are the ones that come in at lower prices and have more features. You look at the Rapsodo MLM2 Pro, you look at the FlightScope Mevo Gen 2, both of those excellent units, tons of features, great metrics, sim capabilities, all sorts of stuff. But because they are radar units, they take quite a bit of space. So often what I'll see is people will kind of like try and like shoehorn it in. They'll be like, yeah, I think we can probably make it work. And then they get it, and then they are disappointed because they're not quite as accurate as they expect them to be. So be honest with yourself. If you are using this primarily indoors in tight spaces, an optical camera-based system's probably going to be the better fit, despite the fact some of those other feature sets might be really appealing. On the other hand, if you're planning to primarily use this outdoors on a range, then a radar unit may be the better option. Because like I said, a lot of these do have better feature sets at better price points when compared to their optical counterparts. Also, when you're outdoors, there are some cons to those optical systems. So let's say that it's a little windy out. If you're using, say, the Mevo Gen 2, it's going to track what the ball is actually doing. Whereas let's say you've got the Bushnell Launch Pro, it is just going to look at what the club is doing. So it's not going to tell you what the ball is actually doing. Now, there are normalization settings you can use that might take into account local weather and local conditions, but typically a radar unit is going to be more accurate when it comes to distance outdoors. And last year I saw this when we went out and tested a full swing kit right next to a GC quad. When it came to most accurate distance numbers, the full swing kit blew away the GC quad in terms of pure distance numbers because it was a windy day and the quad wasn't taking that into account. Now, if you're someone who's primarily looking for things other than distance, then those optical units can still be super useful outdoors, but you just want to be honest with yourself around what you are looking for. Are you someone that truly wants a hybrid launch monitor? Do you want to be able to use it indoors and use it outdoors? That's something to consider as well. So realistically, at some point, I should probably do a video all about the pros and cons of both of these, but I just want you to really think about how you're planning to use it. If you are planning to use it 80-90% primarily indoors, unless you have a whole lot of space, it's probably going to be better to go for an optical unit. If you're planning to use it primarily outdoors on the range, then I think some of those radar options make a lot more sense. And if you're planning to use it equally in both, then I would just really think about what your indoor setup looks like and make sure that if you do decide to go with the radar, that it is a good fit for you based on your space constraints. Okay, second thing, and we touched on this just a little bit before, but that is overvaluing features versus is convenience. The best launch monitor is the one that you are actually going to use. And some launch monitors, honestly, are more convenient than others. And so while for a long time, my favorite launch monitor and the one that I've recommended to a lot of people is the FlightScope Mevo Gen 2, or previously the Mevo Plus. That is a great unit with great metrics, but the reality is it is not necessarily for everyone. And one of the biggest complaints I have about it is it does take a little bit of extra time to set up properly. So if you're going outside on the range, making sure that the alignment and everything is exactly where it needs to be in order to give you those accurate results is going to be pretty important every time you go and use it. Now, the more you do it, the easier it gets, the faster it becomes, but it is not necessarily the most convenient in terms of setup. That being said, once you're actually using it, there are other things that make it more convenient. For instance, it has an Apple Watch app, which I absolutely love. So while you're using it, you can get all of your metrics directly on your watch. So that kind of helps compensate for the fact that there isn't a built-in screen. But speaking of screens, that is one of the ultimate convenience aspects. If you don't want to worry about pairing to an app every single time you go out and use a launch monitor, then having one with a built-in screen is really handy. So we're talking the Bushnell Launch Pro, the Voice Caddy SC4 Pro on the lower end, the Full Swing Kit on the higher end. All of those have built-in screens, and they are much easier to just set up, start hitting, get accurate results, and away you go. Typically, I've found that optical units are also easier to set up than those radar units. You don't have to worry quite as much about alignment. You pretty much turn it on, you set it down, you let it recognize the ball, and then you hit. So that convenience factor is really nice. If you're someone who just wants to use your launch monitor for like 15 or 20 minutes on the range before you go out and play, you don't want something that's gonna take you like 5 minutes to set up. So you need to be realistic about how you're planning to use it. Are you planning on using this for a home sim setup where you're not planning to move it at all? Well, in that case, a lot of those other convenience factors like alignment, built-in screen, things like that aren't going to matter as much because of your personal use case. So think about what you're using it for and think about convenience, because I've seen so often people buy a launch monitor and then it's just not convenient for them to use, so it ends up collecting dust, they don't use it, and they would have been better off had they not purchased it at all. All right, number 3 is not factoring in lifetime cost. So with most launch monitors out there, there is going to be some sort of subscription. Sometimes those subscriptions are for sim features, sometimes those subscriptions unlock more data, but in most cases, most products do have one. So often you'll see a product that's really appealing on the surface. So a great example of this is the Bushnell LPI. The LPI costs $1,500, but it has the exact same camera system as the $7,000 Foresight GC3. So on the surface, you might be like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. This one's just as accurate as this device over here that costs almost 5 times as much. Well, with the LPI, you have a subscription. And depending on what you use it for, that subscription could make it, well, a far less good deal than it seems on the surface. So for their $200 subscription, you unlock ClubPath data. Big unlock, really nice to have, and definitely worthwhile. You also unlock the ability to use 5 of their sim courses. But let's say you're someone that doesn't want to use their built-in courses, you're planning to set up a home simulator and you want to use GS Pro. Well, with the LPI, in order to use a third-party solution, you're going to need the $500 gold subscription. Then you're also going to need to pay $250 every year to GS Pro. So just to use GS Pro on the LPI is $750 a year. Not to mention, if you want to use those things, you're going to have a gaming PC. You're going to have a screen or a monitor of some sort. So all of a sudden, that $1,500 launch monitor on the surface is actually significantly more when you factor in all of these extra expenses. So with this video, I don't have time to go into all the different subscriptions of all the different models, but I just wanted to bring up this fact because a lot of times I see people get excited about a lower price product, but then when they actually dig into the cost of what it's going to take to do what they want it to do, well, it gets a lot more expensive. So think honestly about what you are planning to use your launch monitor for and do your research on the costs associated with it. All right, number 4, again, this is one we kind of covered, but it's really important, and a lot of people miss this, is not measuring your space. So for some people, I've seen this happen where you didn't measure the ceiling. You've only got 8 feet ceiling, so you can barely swing a pitching wedge, let alone a driver. You might not have space for any of these units, and you've got to kind of rethink what you're doing. Other people, they don't measure the length, but they get excited about a radar-based unit that has a really good price and has a whole bunch of features for what you get, but they simply don't have enough space for it and end up disappointed in the end. So if you're planning on using one indoors, make sure you measure your space. This also comes into effect if you're using a higher end overhead unit, but that kind of goes beyond the scope of this video. But whatever you do, save your future self the trouble, go measure your space. And finally, for our last point, it is dwelling too much on accuracy. Here is the thing. Every single launch monitor you see out there can be wildly inaccurate. And pretty much every launch monitor, most launch monitors you're looking at, can also be extremely accurate. It really all comes down to your setup, your individual environment, and your use case. So if you go online and if you look at comments for launch monitor reviews, seriously, for like every single one, you're gonna see super positive comments and super negative comments. You're gonna see, this is amazing, it's so accurate, I can't believe I only paid $1,000 for this. And for that same product, you're gonna be like, this is terrible, it's inaccurate, I had to send it back. And so much of that is a personal thing. It comes down to where you're using it, how you're using it, the materials you're using it, the environment that you are using it in. And the reality is there's nobody out there that can tell you what's going to work best with your space. So sometimes you just need to go and get it, try it out, see if it works, and then return it if it's not the right fit. That's kind of the sad reality. But I think for the most part, any of the launch monitors we're looking at that cost like $500 or more, any one of those can be relatively accurate. As you start getting into ones that cost a couple $1,000s, all of those should be very accurate under the right circumstances. But if those circumstances aren't met, you may have less than desirable results. So if I were you, as you're doing your research, I would focus less on accuracy as your main driving metric. Make sure you're finding something that fits your space. Make sure you're finding something that's convenient that you're actually going to use. Make sure you have something that's compatible with the software you want to use. Make sure you have something that's in the right budget. Make sure it does all the things you want it to do, because chances are it is going to be an accurate enough unit. It just depends on whether or not it's going to be accurate within your individual environment. And I hate the fact that that's the answer, but in all of my testing using all these devices, that's just kind of what I have found to be the case. So there you go. Those are the things that I'm seeing people often not considering or not considering enough when it comes to selecting a launch monitor. So much of it, if you were to just kind of sum it up in one statement, it's that people get blinded by price and features rather than thinking about what is actually going to work for their specific use case and their specific space. So do your best to be honest with yourself for how you are planning to use your launch monitor, and if you do that, then the one you inevitably end up buying is one that's going to be a much better fit. My name is Sean Ogle. I'm the founder of this thing here at Breaking 80, where we talk about cool golf products and cool golf courses. If you are not sure which launch monitor is right for you, go take my 30-second quiz. I will link to it below. You're going to answer a few questions around what you're looking for, and I'm going to give you my best recommendation based on the one I think is going to be the best fit for your needs. And if you want to know my take on which launch monitors I think are the best and what the best use cases are for them, then go watch this video right here. I think you will find it really useful. With that, I hope you have an excellent day, and I will see you on the next video. Peace.